Hello everyone and welcome back to MPI TV, sponsored by Socio. I'm Sarah Solomon and it is day 3 of IMEX America. You can probably hear that by my voice. It's starting to get raspy. We still have a whole another day to go, so hopefully I don't completely lose my voice before then. But it's been a phenomenal show so far, and as I said yesterday, there is a normalcy happening here on the show floor. It feels very normal to be walking up and down the aisles of IMEX America. The hosted buyer appointments are happening left and right, and it really is a special energy after being apart for so long. So here on our show this morning, to join us first is Nancy Snowden. She's the Manager of Educational Experiences for MPI, and it is actually your first IMEX America, Nancy.
It is. It's so exciting. I was telling some people it feels like I'm in an alternate universe. It's just so fun to see everybody, and it's bustling, and it's just so much fun.
What is your first impression? I mean, walking into the show floor, and most of us have not been on a trade show floor in 2 years or so.
Yeah.
So for you, knowing that this is an industry event, it's a larger industry event, what was the first impression?
I mean, I think the first thing is just vibrancy. I mean, I walked into it and it was just like a vibrant city in the trade show floor, and it was just bustling, and I can just feel like a palpable energy in the air. And so it's just been invigorating. I think we've spent the last 18 months inside just hoping that we would get to this point. And just a huge credit to IMEX. They've flawlessly executed so many difficult logistics. And I mean, for a group of people that deal with logistics on a daily basis, that's a difficult feat. And so it's just so impressive.
Yeah, the IMEX group really does have a great team, and you can see that executed on the trade show floor and beyond. So other exciting news for you personally, you are a new mom.
I am, yes. I have a sweet 7-month-old at home. So I'm just so thankful to my husband for holding down the fort while I'm here.
What was that like? I mean, we talk about the importance of having authentic and real human conversations, which we're going to dive into a little bit more. And I think being a new mom in this space, now that travel is coming back, and you kind of ponder, like, do I leave my child behind? Do I get on this airplane? Do I go to Las Vegas? I mean, what was that like for you making that decision to be here?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one that you think really hard about. I think I'm really lucky that I have such a great support system. So I know my son is well taken care of while I'm away. But I think the thing that means the most to me is that MPI sees me as a person first. And I think that's how I see our members too. And that's where that authenticity really comes from to me, is that I'm not just a member of the team, I'm also a mom, right? I'm also Nancy in so many different ways. And so it made it a little bit easier because they know I'm going to step away to FaceTime my son before he goes to bed. They know I'm going to show photos of him to any stranger that will let me, right? Because I want to show him off. And I'm just really thankful for that. They're flexible with my schedule. And so I'm just really appreciative at the end of the day because they make it easy to say yes.
Yeah, and that kind of thought process and mentality is trickling into, as you said, our member base. So as the manager of educational experiences within MPI, how are you channeling some of these authentic discussions and conversations within our members?
Absolutely. So it's really interesting because I actually come not from the meetings and events space. I spent almost a decade in higher education. And so it was fascinating. After my first year at MPI, I started to look kind of holistically about what we were providing our members and non-members in terms of education. And a lot of it was skills-based, right? We were really focusing on the profession and what you do as a professional. And the first thing I saw is those professionals are people first, and what do those people need to nourish those interests in that person who they are when they're not on the clock, right? And so I've really tried to think things through like leadership. Right? How do I overcome imposter syndrome? How do I strengthen my emotional intelligence, which will benefit me not just in the professional world, but personally too? And so I've really tried to move forward, understanding that just like myself, right? I'm a mom, right? I need classes on how to do a lot of things in life. So does everybody else. And so when you strengthen the person, you strengthen the professional. And so I'm really trying to take a step back. And so when we think about authenticity in 2022, how can we shape things to meet our profession's needs? We've had a really hard 18 months. And so it's not just about how do I plan my next event now that we're on that rise to recovery. It's how do I plan to recover myself, right? We launched our wellness class just a couple months ago to teach not only wellness design at our events for our attendees, but for ourselves. How do we design a well life for ourselves? And I think that's so critical.
Yeah, the mental health conversation is crucial, especially right now. So it's great that there's no longer a stigma around us having to feel like we are, perfect all the time, and it's okay to be vulnerable and
Absolutely.
and share in those emotions together as a community. So let's talk about MPI Academy.
Yeah.
Some of the new projects and what people
gosh.
can expect going into the new year.
Expect the unexpected. I am trying to bring people from all different industries. If there's anything we've learned from the conversation around future skills and upskilling, the way that we work professionally in this industry is that we have to look to our peers in other industries and take the best parts of it and bring it over into our sector. And so I'm bringing folks from my past life in higher education. I'm bringing them from scientists and doctors, from universities. I'm bringing all sorts of people to the table to have and activate these authentic conversations, because I feel like that's the things that we need to be talking about right now. Because if there's one thing the last 18 months taught us, it's that we don't have time to be inauthentic. Time is precious, and so why not spend every minute that you have being your most authentic self and learning how to create spaces that allow people to be their most authentic self. And so that's kind of my mission this next year. We're going to go beyond skills. We're going to talk about abilities, right? We're going to transcend some of the basic project level management skills that we've developed in this industry and kind of what's next. And so, we're talking about things like, the future of automation is something that's really scary in our industry. And so how can we as individuals and people take those talents that are unique to us and bring them to our jobs? So lots of exciting things there. I can't talk enough about the ways that we're redesigning things. WEC education, as you know it, is going to be completely different. We're looking at social learning, right? We're looking at how people can use their thoughts, knowledge, and abilities to contribute to conversations and not just position a subject matter expert at the front of the room. So lots of exciting things.
Awesome. And I always think from a chapter perspective, right, as a chapter leader myself, how can our chapters really tap into some of this new, exciting education that you're bringing forth?
Absolutely. And so, one thing I've talked to our VPs of education about a lot is don't reinvent the wheel. Take something that's a great product and form a discussion group around it, right? Or say, that topic resonates so much with our chapter, let's do a book discussion group. Or how can we use it as a spin-off for our education? And so I'm really hoping to provide tangible products to our chapters that they can reuse, utilize, and make good use of, because you're busy, right? You have so much in your personal and professional life. I want to give you the tools that you need to be successful. So really excited to have that happen as well.
Awesome. And you mentioned you are a quote unquote outsider of this industry. You come from higher education.
Yes.
So now that you're in this space, what has been the best part of it for you?
Oh gosh, I think in a lot of industries, they give you a lot of boxes to fit into, and they say, here's where I need you to neatly put yourself while you're in this role. And the great thing about MPI, as wild and crazy as this world is they let me be who I am. And so I'm a little bit crazy and funky, and sometimes I'll be really loud, or sometimes I'm really quiet, and it doesn't matter. MPI has kind of just embraced all shades of who I am, and so I'm so appreciative of that, right? I think that's the cool thing about this industry is you see so many different people from different places and backgrounds and countries, different languages. I love the feeling of walking down a hallway and hearing so many dialects as I move through the building, and I think that's what's so special about it and what I love about this world. I think the final thing I'll say about that is when I interviewed for this job, my boss Jesse States, who I adore, asked me, why would you want to leave the industry that you spent 10 years in? And I said, I'm actually curious, because I want to make a change in the world. I want to do something with my life, and I don't feel like I'm accomplishing that. And I said, I really feel like events are the place where people come together to create change so that they can help others create change. And so what a more powerful way than to be the person that might help start that ripple effect. And so that's really what I found in this industry.
Goosebumps. And we are so happy to have you in this industry. And I think
Thank
I can
you.
speak on behalf of all event professionals that once you're in this space, you're never getting out.
That's what I hear.
So you are stuck with us forever, and that is a good thing.
Absolutely.
Awesome, Nancy. Well, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing
Thank you,
and
Sarah.
bringing your expertise into this industry. You are certainly going to drive us forward and
Thanks,
help make
Sarah.
change. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
You got it. All right. So coming up next, we've got two very special guests that will be joining us, and they're great friends of mine. So I would like to welcome Gary Murakami and John Ellenfeld to join us here on our MPI TV stage. How are ya?
Good. How are you?
Good. Good to see you as always. So, I was just chatting with Nancy about how this industry has really made her feel inclusive and accepted and just, come as you are, if you will. So I know for both of you that is extremely important and something that you're very passionate about in bringing forth into our industry through the DEI committee, right? MPI's DEI committee. So let's first chat about the DEI committee, and John, we'll start with you.
Okay.
Some of the work that the committee has been doing over the past year.
Sure. So the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee has been very busy this last year. They have been tackling some of the things that are necessary in our industry and needed to be able to move the areas of DEI forward. One of the great things that they've been doing is making sure that the conversations are happening and that the members of MPI are being able to engage and to get the resources that they need to understand DEI, to bring it to their chapter, to bring it to their organization, to bring it to their lives. And that's established through some podcasts that will happen on a monthly basis that are called Real Talk. So Real Talk is a dialogue that actually takes the element of diversity, which is really the differences of all humans, and brings it to the table and makes it relevant for everyone. And being able to have different engagement on things like unconscious bias or privilege, or the elements that maybe sometimes don't have a clear understanding or how you would incorporate it into your daily lives or your own organization. So now that members are getting the resources that they need to be able to go back and empower their own organizations, empower their chapters, we're seeing significant results. And it's a conversation that isn't just something that is needed to be done because it's the right thing to do. It's now being a sound business sense because it creates innovation of thought and it creates more profitability for organizations, less turnover. And as we emerge out of the pandemic, it's something that seems to be at the top of the list for all organizations.
Yeah, and Gary, you've been in this industry for some time now, so these conversations, as John mentioned, are happening. There's more awareness around the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So where have you seen us make the greatest strides within the industry so far?
So what I applaud MPI for doing, and through John's leadership as the board liaison and really having the DEI committee, we're having these conversations, right? We're bringing it to the forefront, helping people to understand the importance of what we can do, that our events industry does to transform social and economic change. And by doing this, we're having the conversation so we can educate other people, right? We can educate future leaders. We can really help people to think about whether it's a venue, whether it's a destination, whether it's a planner planning their strategic events. What do they need to do to make conscious decisions that makes impact for not only society, but economic decisions as well. So, and through Real Talk and all of these conversations, and as a chapter leader, I know, Sarah, you mentioned that as a chapter leader, we need to give them the resources, right? And what can MPI do to create future leaders in the industry? And that's what's really important.
So, I've been having a lot of these conversations, especially with, big corporations where there is conversation around it. And sometimes I wonder, are we just talking about it, but there's a lack of action? And, maybe John, you can take this one. Like, where do we stand with that? It's great that there is conversation around it, right? Because that's a step in the right direction. But are we doing enough to take action around these initiatives?
You bring up an excellent point, Sarah. And there actually is not being enough done around it, but we are moving the needle in that direction. So most organizations understand the importance of diversity. They will have a statement on their website. They may have it in their employee handbook. But then once they hire this diverse population of humans, remember that's the difference between all of us, that's your easy definition on diversity, it kind of stops there, and there's no roadmap or ascension for them within the organization to be able to get to leadership positions or maybe even have access to top leadership where those decisions are made. So that's where the equity part of DEI comes into place, and that's making sure it's a level playing field where everyone has the ability to have access to the elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and positions that will elevate them in leadership, elevate them in innovation of thought. So once you have the statement, that's just where it starts. Then it becomes an education component for top leadership, top management within organizations or associations to understand that there needs to be programs and scope of work within the inside developing aspects of the organization as they grow, as they move forward, to allow that ascension up. And then once that ascension is allowed up, you get to the last part, which is inclusion, which is bringing your true and authentic self to all you do. And when you attain that, that's when you have the elements of companies being 25% more innovative and 20% more profitable. And this is statistically proven. It isn't just a grandiose idea. So it makes sound business sense as well to incorporate DEI into every element of your strategy.
Well, and just to piggyback a little bit on it, is it's sometimes the conversation when someone says DEI, it's a big conversation, right? And what do you do to kind of unpack it a little bit for our industry? And what John has mentioned is a journey. So how do we, especially at MPI, take people on the journey through the DEI? And it's a little difficult sometimes to understand what it is. So we have to be able to provide the resources, the conversation, the education to take people to be able to take the DEI conversation into specifics into our industry so that we understand what is it specifically we can do. Because what John mentioned is like an entire journey of things that when we get to fullness of DEI, but as he mentioned, there's the diversity conversation, there's the equity conversation, there's the inclusion conversation, there's also the belonging conversation. So what can we do specifically, right, from a strategy perspective, but also from a tactical stat to accomplish some of these objectives?
And part of the journey, and you can both speak to this because you are global board members, right? So part of the journey through the DEI committee within MPI is to share this journey and conversation and initiatives with our global board. And that is really where change gets sparked, from the top down into our MPI community. So how have you seen the international board members be receptive to this, and where do we still have a lot more work to do?
Well, I just want to mention that as John is a board member, he's been very open, and this is where I find that MPI is willing to hear the conversation, because when you're saying top down, there are so many things that we as members, and I consider myself a member, a chapter leader, we have things to say, we have things we want to share, and I think that this is where the MPI Global Board has really heard, right? And they continue to listen, and they also understand the journey they're going on. And I think that through John's, as a liaison for our committee, we've been able to make suggestions, impact, and influence to have these conversations, and they're very open to hearing that. So from a member's perspective.
Yeah.
Yes, and then from an international board perspective, the entire community on the international board is very engaged with MPI leadership to make sure that DEI is woven into every fabric of what they do. An example this last year is the educational component at the Chapter Business Summit. And that's where the emerging chapter leaders from the different chapters of MPI converge and get some training and education on how to successfully lead their chapters. And that dialogue engages there on the importance of it and how they take that back to their chapter and incorporate DEI efforts. It doesn't just end with that dialogue. They have resources on the MPI DEI resource page that are completely complementary as an element of your membership, and they can tap into those 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you don't have to, you could be at the middle of the night thinking, hey, I had this great idea, I just need some resources to be able to implement it. You have it available to you. So that's some of the great things that MPI has done, and they align themselves strategically, like the relationship here with IMEX America, with other organizations that also embrace DEI. So when you start doing that from strategic alliances and the resources and the ongoing dialogue, you are having the equitable chance, the middle part of DEI, to have everybody come together, give their voice, give their opinion, whether it's somebody who is an introvert or extrovert, and that's where that element of change happens. So it's really exciting times with MPI.
It really is. And Gary, we were just chatting earlier about conversations that you were having with the IMEX team on Monday this week before the show even started about this discussion. So if you don't mind sharing some of that conversation.
And IMEX was very open to it because they understand the platform that they have, and partnerships like MPI, right, and other organizations are really important to be able to elevate the conversation. So IMEX was very interested because of the platform and the reach that they have on a global reach is how do you take the conversation outside of just the North American space. And we had a quick conversation about, well, how do you make space? And this is what John was sort of mentioning, what MPI is doing, what IMEX is doing, is to make space for the conversation, make space for the communities. And we were specifically talking about Asian event professionals in the industry, because sometimes that's a smaller group of people, but how do we make space for them? And it was interesting to have such a reception from IMEX. And I realized that this conversation is becoming much bigger, right? And it's not specific to Asian event professionals. It's specific to all of these different communities. And are we making space to have these conversations so that all people feel included and welcome? And I'm just so excited that IMEX has really been focusing on that. It's great that MPI is, and the partnerships that John was talking about with all the organizations.
Yeah, and we were talking about the Real Talk webinar series, which is going to be very, very exciting to have that Real Talk within our community. But John, we just recently recorded a podcast as well, and you shared an example, which I thought was brilliant, of corporation Chase Bank, right? And I, if you have not heard the podcast, you absolutely should. But I would love for you to share that example of how corporate companies are really putting DEI at the forefront through the example that you shared.
Sure. So when Sarah and I talked last month on the recording of the podcast around unconscious bias through Real Talk with MPI, I brought up an example of the recent U.S. Open of tennis that just happened this last summer here in the United States. And Chase Bank has been a sponsor of that for the prize money for a long time now, multiple years. Every year when they crown the champion, it is always the senior vice president of wealth management, someone very high up with the organization, that presents the winner's check. This year, it was actually their senior vice president of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you're seeing this paradigm shift on the importance of that. And it isn't just, yes, you're getting a check and it's the prize money. They're now putting their foot forward and saying, this is a platform we embrace. Our customers embrace it, therefore it needs to be prominent and woven into all that we do. And it was a very proud moment to say, wow, that's subtle, so people at home are not necessarily zeroing in on that because they're seeing who won the overall championship, but they hear it, and now it becomes part of the normalcy of doing business. And then you know you're really achieving DEI when you see it as part of the normalcy, and it doesn't have to be a component taken out and examined. It's just part of your fabric of doing business.
Well, I love that story about it because I just wanted to mention to you that that's an event, right? And if you think about an event and that platform that they were able to utilize it to elevate that conversation, that's what we do each and every day, right? And it just shows how events, conferences, what we do can transform, make social and economic transformation. So I just wanted to piggyback on that because that's such a great example of how they were able to use an event to actually influence change.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the power of this business, right? Which we're all blessed to be in. So thank you both so much for your leadership and all that you do. It's always a pleasure to see you as well in person. So thank you. I appreciate your time. All right, everyone. Well, that does it for us on the morning edition of MPI TV, sponsored by Socio. As you know, we will be right back here at this desk at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, and we're going to be chatting with Kevin Kirby, the executive director of the MPI Foundation, which I'm very passionate about. We've got Rendezvous this evening, so he's going to give us a glimpse into all things Rendezvous, and also we've had a silent auction. I don't know if you know about it, but if you don't, you should definitely check it out. It's a great way to contribute to our foundation, but also potentially take part and win some pretty incredible items and experiences. And we will also be chatting with Drew Holmgreen, who heads up our brand engagement for MPI as well. So lots coming up. You don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll leave you now with a quick message from our sponsor, Socio.
Socio, now a part of WebEx, is an end-to-end event management platform for virtual, in-person, and hybrid events. With customers in over 70 countries, including Google, Women in Product, and Stanford University, Socio can power events of all sizes and types, from company sales kickoffs to international conferences. Create your unique event experience with our intuitive drag-and-drop platform